Oh my.
Interesting. Well, that must be new for Zoom. Hello,
Yeah.
everybody, on this very, very beautiful Sunday morning on May 23rd, 2021. I'm blessed to have all of you with me. We're discussing my service. And real quick, some apologies, some big apologies, because it was late last night when I finally got everything mixed down and I went to upload it to YouTube. The upload went perfectly and I drank my whiskey and promptly fell asleep. To wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to see a Gmail message from one of our congregation members saying she could not find the sermon. And I thought, my goodness, that is strange. Until I went to the YouTube channel to find out that I had uploaded it to my music channel and not to the UU website. So my deepest apologies, everyone. So, okay, Julianne wanted to go first.
I, I, if there is no God, would humans invent one?
If, mhm,
Is an enduring question.
yeah,
I still like Boethus' commentary on Lady Fortune
mm,
and how whatever you have in this life essentially can be taken away at any time.
yes,
And too many cycles of that, one would tend to believe or want to believe in a benevolent spirit in the sky or wherever to help you out.
yes, yes. That's true. So when you started, did you say uh, that it would be necessary to invent God if God didn't exist?
Yeah,
Okay,
I do think
yeah.
humans have that tendency.
Well, there is that quote about that humans made God in their own image.
Mhm.
And I think there's a lot of validity to that idea because, for instance, I tried to in the slideshow, I wanted to do something fun and different, so I thought I'd show all of these portrayals of God or conceptions of the divine, I guess you could say. And it's an unremarkable fact that the sublime art that was created by the people uh, who did the art made art that looked like them. And so for instance, it would be interesting if we had like a Russian god who looked like a South African. That would be remarkable. you know no, but I'm glad that you can bring up Mistress Fortune because uh I think that the idea of Mistress Fortune, taking from giving and taking away in the consolation of philosophy, um, for me, it re-emphasizes what the book of Job is trying to teach us as well, is that if there is a divine figure, right? He, she, it is not terribly concerned with our happiness. And that's where I tend to part ways with the New Age thinkers who believe that the universe wants you to be happy. They believe that the universe wants you to have abundance. And I just look out into the world and I see no evidence that that is the case.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, was that JC?
Yes.
Real quick, Julianne, did you get all of your thoughts out or?
I did. I
Okay.
just wanted to get it started.
Yeah, well, then thank you. Thank you for that. Go ahead, JC.
Um, I was intrigued by your whole process, including the joke.
Mm,
And
thank you.
but the small thing that I think for me was really huge was your idea of experience being an essential aspect of whether something is believed or known.
Right.
Okay. Because for me, things I know sometimes inspire me, but it's still a head trip.
Hmm.
Whereas things I feel, when that is where I am inspired, like from the neck down,
Mhm.
I tend to think of those as more spiritual.
Mhm.
Even though it's a body thing, it's what the body does to tell me, whoa, pay attention, because this is interesting. So anyway, I go back to the tiny little experience that I had with that blind or a deaf baby
Mhm.
that was given cochlear implants,
Mm.
and they turned on his TV program, which was cartoons and had music to it. And they put the camera on him, and you saw him like here for the first time. And the first thing that happened was his body moved.
Right.
And then he said, oh, so that little tiny moment of his experience is what I remembered while you were talking about that. And I realized that for me, experience is critical. And so that also goes to what Lilene and I talked about, which I will just mention, which is also a book that is popular with me right now. Many of us have already also incorporated past lives,
Mhm.
an aspect of prayer that involves actually going directly to God or spirit, whatever, and that those things we have experienced to the extent that to me, they are real.
Mm.
And so my sense of the spiritual is not totally unreal. It's something that I can tap into. And so maybe because I experience it, it's something that I know,
Mhm.
but every time I do it, I get an answer that was not one in my mind.
Fair enough.
It's knowing goes beyond mine. So I'm just adding that to your whole thing.
And I really appreciate that, JC, because I, I would never presume to be able to speak for anybody else that if you have a relationship with the divine, or with the unseen, I guess,
Mhm.
that relationship is valid. You know, for instance, I have no reason to believe that when people speak about having past life memories, that they are lying. You know, and so when people talk about things like that, I will tend to take them at their word. My question about like past life regression, are you one of those people who can recall vividly past
I
life?
have remembered, I have recalled past life.
Mhm.
My more active thing is to ask spirit for answers to questions.
Okay. Okay. And yeah, well, to that, I can say I wholeheartedly believe 120% that that's the case, JC. You know, not to always talk about Jordan Peterson, but Jordan Peterson was debating an atheist. And it was a very, very interesting conversation. And the atheist was talking about the futility of prayer, you know, referencing things like why, if intense prayer could do something like cure cancer, why cannot intense prayer grow back limbs that have been severed, for instance? Which is a completely valid question. And Jordan Peterson's response to that was, if you want a prayer that can be answered, sit down and pray about some of the worst things you've done and ask God to reveal what you can do to rectify that. That is a prayer that will be answered and you will not like it. So, but you know, it would be interesting to talk about reincarnation. I see Laline wanted to speak, so maybe we can come back to that. Go ahead, Laline.
She and I had a conversation, and that was her end. My end was dealing with the three dimensions that you delineated out. And for me, there's that other whole dimension of multiple ways of knowing. And I mean, they just run the whole gamut. And I'm one who experiences a lot of that, a lot of being able to connect on multiple levels, and fairly healthy memory of past lives, including in travels, being somewhere and knowing what my life at that moment, and having that life just take over. And for a short period of time, I am in that life. So I just wanted to add that. I think for all of us, there are more dimensions, or in varying ways, there are different dimensions other than what we normally think of as 1, 2, and 3.
No, that's a fair point. I think we live among mysteries, you know, and sometimes those mysteries, either they could be so overwhelming or so mundane, or you know, that we're focused on our daily lives that we have to ignore them sometimes. And there are those people, I believe, who are sensitive to, you know, whether it be extra dimensional or multi-dimensional thought, you know, or just a sensitivity, an extra sensitivity to the reality that we exist in. And people who bring those experiences up, I think we ought to consider them. So now we're meditating.
I didn't want to occupy any more time. I just wanted to differentiate between the two of us.
Oh,
Because you know how sometimes couples just sort of, you know.
I have no idea what you're talking about. No, that's cool. Go ahead, Lurley.
Well, I need your permission to relate the story.
Oh dear.
Is this the Japan past life regression story?
Yes,
Okay, can you make it as brief as possible?
very possible. Okay. My youngest son was 3 years of age. We were transferred to Japan because my husband was in the Marine Corps. His 2 older brothers and his father went to work. And this one day, he at 3 years of age, comes into my room and says, "Can you keep a secret?" And I says, "Of course." And anyway, he says, "I used to live here." And my name was, and he gave a Japanese name, started with an S. And he says, however, he says, I can't remember now, but I died when I was 64. And then he turned around and walked out of the room. We had a barbecue for the neighborhood people. We were living in the community, and I had written the name down on an envelope. When Dick got home, I, told him about it. Anyway, he brought it up at this barbecue. Everybody was sitting around in the living room, and he says, "Does anybody know this guy?" And this guy's, and he gave the name, and the one person spoke up and he says, "Oh yeah, he's a farmer philosopher, lives in Tokuyama City, but he comes to Iwakuni all the time." And Dick asked, he says, "Well, is he still alive or something?" And he says, "Oh, he died 3 years ago."
Right.
That's quick. That's
Well,
fast.
yeah. So
Well, Michael poo-pooed the idea for the longest time.
I'm still
but-
poo-pooing the idea.
Well, things have come up that, well, you were on a walk with your dad and your
Yes, yes.
brothers, and
So with,
okay.
with not to turn this conversation into a family reunion.
Okay. Yeah.
But all right. Now the thing is that there are like lots of documented experiences of young children basically saying the same things. And again, it's one of those mysteries that we don't really know. I think there is an impetus to want it to be true. Right? I mean, does that make sense?
Well, it was a shock to me. I had no, I didn't know where you were coming from.
Right. Yeah. Um, it like kya kehna, right, is I think it's an Urdu phrase. It means life is a mystery, which may be a better expression for the bland English. The English. We
Yeah.
Glennis, I think you had something to say about past lives.
Bail him out, Glennis.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, no, I'm going to throw him into deeper water.
Okay.
Actually, the story is saying that the Japanese life, the man in that life was a philosopher, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
And Michael today is one of the more interesting philosophers I actually know.
I,
Well, that goes even
I'm
further.
blessed
because-
to to have that title.
It carries over, my friend. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah. No, I guess my thing is that, when there's no way to verify it, and there are rational explanations for things, I will always default to the rational, and that's just the way I am, or that's the only way I know how to be and function in this world. But we're clearing the room. I see everybody walking away.
Temporary,
Yeah,
sorry.
My
no.
apologies, Michael, my apologies, but it just was a fascinating experience. And I just couldn't,
No. One of my joys in life is to be able to chastise you. So,
oh, that's good. Okay.
So maybe what we can do is move. Oh, go ahead, Lois.
Well, there are schools of thought that there are concurrent lives as well as past lives,
Mhm.
and it possibly is true, Lurley. We just don't know. Like you, I find the whole subject fascinating.
So, Lillian, could you explain that a little bit? Sorry, I don't get that message.
To come back to some of the topics raised in your sermon.
Yes, absolutely.
If we
But
could do that, you opened by saying you had 2 or 3
yes,
suggestions or recommendations.
thank you. Yeah, but just to respond to what Lois and Glennis was saying, I don't know if this is true or not. I don't know if this is apocryphal, but I heard on a radio documentary that I was listening to that the Inuit people believe that you have essentially 3 spirits, that
Mhm.
you're an amalgamation of that this existence is unique, but it's a unique and temporary existence of 3 eternal existences, right? And that's the physical, the mental, and the spirit, that they all join together in this life in one, and then after that the 3 move into other directions. And so that would seem to at least bolster the idea that you could exist somewhere concurrently, for Lois and what Glennis had to say. I was thinking maybe, because I remember when Reverend Annie was with us, she did a workshop called Building Your Own Theology. And
Yes.
yeah, and since we are, a liberal church where you can actually do that, I wondered if anybody would mind volunteering what it is they believe and why.
Crickets.
How about Paul? Since yeah, you're right now you're muted. I just asked you to unmute.
I was gonna comment
I'll
on.
volunteer.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. We started the conversation off about our concept of God, and I've spent a life kind of like reassessing my conceptualization of what God is. When I was a kid in catechism school, he was a wise old man with the beard up in a cloud, looking down. And I always felt comforted in my little 7-year-old mind that it was really nice to know that there's somebody's got my back,
Right.
so to speak. Um, but as time went by and I matured, uh, that God became less of an all-knowing, guy that's like Santa Claus. He knows when you're sleeping, he knows when you're awake, and um, to more like a benevolent force that you can tap into, but still kind of intelligent. And then from there, uh, I think I've kind of evolved to my present day notion that God is actually the projection of our subconscious perception or our subconscious reality, which is why God is always kind of looking out for us, because it's us who's projecting our own God back to us. And at first that kind of bothered me because it kind of took the personality of God out. It's like God didn't really care. And I don't think God cares any more than we care from our own individual perspective. I don't know if I'm making sense, but my personal theology is that there's a collective consciousness out there that we seem to assimilate into and assimilate out of, and experience is the motivation for coming back and reassessing our own theology, so to speak. I do think that we reincarnated, and I think that's the reason why, is that we need the experience for development.
Yeah, and it does make sense, and I think that's why reincarnation exists in so many religions the world over. And it's interesting that you were talking about being a kid in catechism, because the representation of God brought you comfort, right? Like it
Yes.
was, yeah. I think it's not a coincidence that we are visual creatures as humans. Um, I remember being at, I think it was Universal Studios, and inside Universal Studios, I was very young. I think I was probably about, 5 or 6. And inside of Universal Studios, they had a exhibit on the development of motion picture. And one of the motion pictures that they had was scenes from heaven. Now, this was in grainy, like black and white cardstock film. And because it was so old and it was in black and white, I was sure that it was true. And I remember that feeling such a sense of calm, knowing that God was real, because I could look at pictures of him. It didn't occur to me that these were actors, but I also thought that people lived inside speaker cabinets. So, uh, but you're right. But I wanted to follow up with you, Paul, just a second. So you do believe that this intelligent force has your back, right? Or is rooting for you in some way?
Yes,
Okay.
to a degree.
To a degree.
To a
Okay.
degree.
So, and just for my own curiosity, what do you think, like, how would you respond to the problem of evil, right? Why just to a degree? Why not wholly?
Well, as far as evil goes, I think that it's something that we are all capable of, and
Yeah.
we want to minimize evil in our lives and in the world. In fact, it surprises me that there are so many people in the world right now who are bent on doing evil tasks. It just I would think that after all these thousands of years, that we would be reaching some sort of plateau of enlightenment, but just here in the church.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
That was my joke.
Oh, sorry. No, I was thinking so intently on what you were saying. Sorry. Yeah, the problem of evil, or humans' capacity to do harm, is if it doesn't trouble you, you're not thinking enough about it. You know.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Paul. I wonder if we can keep going. Does anybody else feel like, yeah, go ahead, Lurley.
He says reluctantly. I can relate with Paul. I was raised in the Presbyterian Church, and as a young child, I envisioned God as being a person sitting on a throne in the clouds, et cetera, et cetera. And it was a very comforting feeling. Then as an adult, and I couldn't reason that there was something like that. And actually, to give credit to you, when I joined the church, it was because I believe there is a spirit in all of us that can connect with other spirits in the congregation. And that was a great deal of comfort to me. So I really believe we all have God in us, and you might just term it as spirit, but it's an ability to be able to relate to each other. And I do believe the general nature of humans is kindness, and that whether it's genetics, and you can get into all this inheritance stuff, but that evil will pop up. But it may, I don't have the answers, but I do believe that God is in all of us
Okay.
in a spirit.
And Connie, yeah, go ahead, Connie. Sorry.
Okay, I was, well, where you had asked the question to Tom about evil.
Mhm.
And when you were speaking, I was thinking about that in association with what you were saying about instincts. So if we go way back to Cro-Magnon man or whatever, that they responded by instincts. And then when there was language, those behaviors got labels. So the idea of evil had to have come, I assume, when we begin to have language.
Right.
Or maybe dirty looks. But I think now, even with people that you talk to, depending on how they were brought up or whatever, something that seems so evil to me may not seem evil to that other person, because in their instincts or whatever, it might be survival. I don't know. But anyway, I'm throwing that out about the idea of evil.
No, it's absolutely valid. So just to explore it a little further, Connie, if that's okay, what can you think of something that you would think of as evil, but somebody else might be okay with?
Well, yes.
Okay.
I was watching Underground Railroad.
Okay.
Book that's been put into a film. And I was just sickened by the things that were going on. But then I thought about, if I had been brought up to think that certain humans were not human, were more akin to animals or whatever.
Right.
Anyway, if I'd been brought up with that different perception, then some of those acts that I can hardly read or watch may not have seemed evil. It'd be like burning somebody who they thought was a witch. I
Right.
mean, the idea of evil, I think, goes clear back to some of those instincts of what we did when we were confronted with some situation.
That's a great example. That's a fantastic example, because there are social ills, that can be instituted in the culture, and certainly slavery was one of them. Now, of course, from the perspective of the slave owner, yeah, I can't speak for them, but I would imagine that they viewed the relationship something like having a pet, for
Mhm.
instance.
Yeah.
And so from their perspective, perhaps I know that this was an argument. The argument was that the people held as slaves were so uncivilized that they would simply kill and murder and be, vicious in society if we allowed them to go free. That was certainly an argument that was made. And it's probably one of the great historical examples of justice that many of those slave owners lived to see the fact that they were wrong. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Carol.
To me, what you really are talking about there is the human need to rationalize, whether it's our own mistakes or weaknesses. We always have to rationalize our misdeeds. I think it's a basic tendency for humans, period. And as far as a belief, what our beliefs are, I know I have many friends who belong to fundamentalist churches, and they truly believe that God is involved in every phase of their life.
Or Satan.
Every day.
Yeah.
And this came up during the election, and one of my friends made the comment, well, whatever happens, it's God's will. And I said, no, I don't think so. I don't think God gives a damn about our politics. So, and maybe we're getting a little bit off of your original
That's okay.
question.
That's
What
okay.
is your basic belief?
Mhm.
And many people would say that I'm probably an atheist,
Okay.
but I'm not. I like the comfort of believing that there is some kind of a God, something that helps us. But I don't believe that something is involved in my daily life. But I know that when there's a death of someone I love, I want that comfort of something, some super being. So I believe basically that we are no different than the plants that grow from the soil, our pet dogs and cats, any other living creature, that we live and we are born, we live and we die. And that is the way it is.
Mhm.
And so I keep telling myself, don't be afraid of death. I am afraid of pain, and the pain maybe that precedes death. But why should I be afraid of death if it is a natural thing to happen? So I don't know. That's my basic belief that I fall back on.
It's so interesting in these conversations. Carol, have you ever read "To Study Philosophy is to Learn to Die" by yeah? Oh my gosh, who wrote that? I think his name was, oh geez, that's going to drive me to, okay, never mind. It's not that important.
I'm going to write it down.
Yeah. It's an essay. Montaigne, Michel de Montaigne. he wrote, to study philosophy is to learn to die. And in the essay, basically, he sets out this idea that fear of death is essentially fear of pain and fear of the unknown, especially. And to be afraid of a state that you have never experienced is inherently irrational. And if you think further on it, if death were not available to us, after enough time went by, we would cry out to the heavens for it to exist. That- and so it's always interesting how it seems like there are these fundamental truths to our existence, that whether or not you're exposed to these thoughts, people will come to these same conclusions. And you just showed that very, very perfectly. But one thing I wanted to ask you, Carol, about where you started is in rationalizing, where we I think you said it's an instinct for us to rationalize evil or wrongdoings that we've done. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think that it's ever that it could be beneficial to rationalize? Can you imagine a situation where the rationalization actually gets us further along the moral timeline?
Well, I can.
Okay.
I think it can be beneficial to the individual
Okay.
to get them through the day. Or, well, let's think of genocide. Let's think of the elimination of the Jewish people in Germany. And a friend of mine who grew up in Germany and remembered World War II. She was old enough as a child, and her father disappeared. She never knew how, if he was a soldier or what. In talking to her one day, she looked at me, she said, well, you know, Carol, Hitler was not all bad. And that just that just was a shock to me. But that was rationalization, and my only response was, he came awfully close.
Oh, fair enough. Okay.
But and I don't recall going beyond that. I don't recall hearing her give specifics about him being not all bad. I immediately thought, well, yeah, I heard he won't kill a fly.
Right.
You know?
Right. No, that's from what I understand, he was actually quite an animal lover. I went head deep over the past 4 years into some of like the neo-Nazi, white nationalism, because I really desperately wanted to understand how they thought and their kind of conception of the way that the world was. And the rationalizations of Hitler, first off, is like the Holocaust never happened. That's something that they, will claim, but also that he was an animal lover and an upright, you're right. People will go incredible depths when it comes to that kind of rationalization. I think Connie had a different kind of response, though, which I'd be curious to hear. And then Laleen wanted to chime in.
Well, my response, this is about evil, but if you think about it, how many times do acts of what we call evil in the mind of the perpetrators or whatever, do they think they're teaching a lesson? So when you're talking about rationalizing, if you think you're teaching somebody a lesson, I think an example would be parents who whip their children with a belt. They, in their mind, they're teaching a lesson. So I think they don't associate that act with being evil.
Okay.
And so when I started thinking about that, like retaliation, where we go and bomb, I mean, so many things that we do that are evil have to do with teaching someone a lesson.
Right. Right. It's and especially with retaliation and war, that's a great example, because there's this idea that one nation can institute corrective behavior of another nation through violence,
Mhm.
which seems to be an extraordinary leap of faith. You know, with children, I guess, in a way, and this is just off the top of my head, but in a way, it's like you're denying the humanity if you think that physical punishment is the way to go, um, because it's kind of like the slaveholder who regards their slave as an animal or a pet. Um, that if you can institute physical harm or pain, and that will correct the behavior because of fear of pain, it would seem to me to be a denial of humanity. Personally, that's my view on it. Laleen.
I had a couple of thoughts. I wanted to drop back a minute to what Carol was saying, because her beliefs parallel mine almost completely. So starting with that premise, I connect every living thing as being basically the same. And I mean, we can talk about evolution and intelligence and, dominance, and a lot of different things that might make us as humans, in a very different kind of category. But I want to go back to infants, to birth. A lot of the research says that basically a child is born with three basic responses: love, joy, happy, that category; fear of falling, of not having one's needs met. I'm going to confuse these. And what was my other one?
Is it pain?
Need.
Sorry.
Need separated from fear, in the sense of needing to communicate, my diaper needs changing, I'm hungry, etc. And a lot of the research on that, which has been really interesting to me, is stuff that's done on things like what happens when something occurs in the womb that alters the birth response. And we've done so much on alcohol and drug use and been able to really see how there's a different range of emotional response that infants are then born with. So that brings us to nurture, nature discussions. And I can't help but look at, and I guess it's the shrink in me, the psychotherapist, but I can't help but look at the amazing array of behaviors I've seen over my career based on early childhood.
Yeah.
And early childhood can go all the way back to infancy.
Right.
So then we have to say, well, other than family of origin or caregivers or whoever had imprint on that earliest infant child, were there other mentors? Were there other things?
Right.
What was the culture? What influence? And you can't do therapy with someone without doing a complete psychosocial, kind of inventory. And then we get to the discussion of evil, and we have to really look at reality, that there are some people who are born without. And we don't understand the biochemistry or psychochemistry of that completely, but we do know for a fact that there are infants from a very early age that do not have those three ranges of emotions and will kill a cat as soon as they're old enough to do so.
Right.
Will do, harmful, kinds of things. So I just wanted to add that as another way of really looking at the whole question of evil.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a pet peeve And that's the idea of ever referring to slavery or slave owners as having pets.
Oh,
I want to reframe that into dogs. That's
Okay.
my work dog. And
Okay.
if that dog doesn't respond to my orders, commands, dominance, etc., then I'm likely to become more dominating, more firm.
Right.
Um,
Well, I hope
I
you,
just think that the culture was so
right.
rampant then, it was very difficult to find slaves that reported coming from
Mhm.
their ownership experience with
Right. Well,
compassionate.
I would hope that you wouldn't think what I said as a
Yeah, don't
justification.
personalize that,
Yeah.
please.
Okay. Yeah. And yeah, what you said about, unfortunately, it seems to be and this is one of those sad truths that keeps me up at night, that there are people that are beyond help, it seems, and it's like, what do we do with that? Because we've got this first principle that, would say that to me, it would say that human dignity means that humanity is redeemable, but is it
I moved
possible?
around so you could see.
Yeah. Is it possible that there are humans that are actually irredeemable? And that is something that I wish I had an answer to. I see you, JC. Kim was next, and then we'll go to you. And then we'll have to wrap up because of congregational meeting. So go ahead, Kim.
Well, I'm going to try to answer your question.
Hmm.
I am a big believer in God,
Mhm.
although before I moved here, I was very angry at God because of him taking away my husband, and I had to go through all that. Now I'm just a little mad at him now. But I have, even though I go to church, to a certain type of church, I view having a personal relationship with God more important than going to church. I'm going to church for the fellowship of everybody else. So I believe that God walks with me and will talk with me, and I talk with him. I don't really pray per se when I'm alone. I more talk to him than pray. So that's kind of how I believe in God, just that he's here with me, helping me out, giving me a pathway to go, and then being with me in that path in life. And I've had to do some arguing with him and yelling and screaming and all that kind of stuff. I hope that explains it a little bit.
I know that feeling very, very well, and I think that if you've been through trauma, the process of cursing God is not foreign to you, or cursing the universe or humanity, or it's real. But I do believe, because I have to, that whatever your conception of the divine is, it does walk with you. I do think that that's true. JC.
One other thing.
Yeah.
I also believe God is a loving God. Some people fear God, and I don't fear God at all. I believe that he's a loving God and loves us all and wants the best for us all. He just has given us free will, and we haven't done too good with it.
Well,
And see,
that's another couple hours of conversation, the free will conversation.
Yeah.
JC, I think you get to round us out.
Well, what Kim describes is something we all need to experience in some way, whether it be a therapist that really, really helps, whether it be insight that we get about our own situation and what we need to give over to or give up on or reach out for. So that's what I hear Kim saying.
Yeah.
My other remark is not something to end the thing on. I'll just Tell Aline and we'll laugh.
Oh, are you sure? Okay, okay. Well, how about this? Has anybody seen The Good Place, the NBC show?
No.
No. Okay. Oh, Paul has. Okay. All right. Yeah. See, Paul and I are, we're like that. All right. Well, it's been a deep conversation. I think I've enjoyed myself, and I really appreciate everybody for coming. I'm going to cut this short so that you all can go to the restroom and get water and all of that for the congregational meeting. The link is posted in the chat if you need it. So if you need to, maybe click that or copy and paste that now before I end the meeting. So
Can somebody help Joyce do this?
yeah, well, Joyce, if you need help, maybe you can give me a call or give one of Lillian and JC a call. So
Where is it?
We'll
in the
just go
chat?
down to chat. Do you see chat
it's in the
on
chat.
the bottom of your screen, Joyce?
Michael, before you leave,
No.
could you give me the name of the author of the essay that you referred to Learn to Die?
For sure. Montaigne, Montaigne, I think. I'm gonna get that wrong and somebody's gonna smack me. So